The man everyone buried the lantern's flame barely moved, even as the cavern trembled around him. The old engineer stepped forward with slow, deliberate confidence. Stone crashed behind him. Steel groaned overhead. Yet he never once looked up. His eyes remained fixed on Mara. "You have Daniel's eyes." Mara tightened her grip on the recorder. "Who are you?" The man smiled faintly. "A ghost, no." Elias interrupted, his voice trembling. "I know him." Nathan turned in surprise. Elias slowly removed his cap. "I never thought I'd see you again." The old engineer nodded. "Neither did I." Nathan looked between them. "You two know each other." Elias answered quietly. "We built Archer Industries together." Silence. The old man finally spoke. "My name is Samuel Archer." Nathan's face went pale. "No. That's impossible. My grandfather died 30 years ago." Samuel gave a tired smile. "That's the story your family was told." Nathan stood frozen. Every family photograph, every company history book, every memorial speech. They all claimed Samuel Archer had died shortly after Archer Industries became successful. But here he stood, alive, older, broken, yet unmistakably real. Nathan whispered, "My father buried an empty coffin." Samuel nodded. "He believed I was dead." So did the entire world. Mara looked at Evelyn. "You knew." She lowered her eyes. "For 28 years. Nathan struggled to find the words. "Why would you disappear?" Samuel looked toward the towering crane. "Because someone had to stay." He slowly raised the lantern. Its warm light revealed massive steel mechanisms hidden beneath the stone floor. Thousands of interlocking gears. Ancient locking systems. Pressure chambers. Counterweights. The entire underground structure wasn't abandoned. It had been maintained. Every single year. Samuel spoke softly. "If I had left, Harbor City would have died with me." Nathan frowned. "I don't understand." Samuel pointed beneath the crane. "Look carefully." Nathan brushed away layers of dust from the steel platform. Underneath, he found hundreds of engraved names. Not company executives. Not engineers. Ordinary people. Dock workers, teachers, children. Entire families. Mara whispered, "What is this?" Samuel answered, "The people Daniel saved." Nobody spoke. Samuel continued. "The accident reported by the newspapers never happened. There was no equipment failure. There was no explosion. There was only one decision." Nathan looked at him. "What decision?" Samuel closed his eyes. Daniel discovered a chain reaction that would destroy the entire harbor. He had enough time to save only one thing. The evidence, or the people. Mara already knew the answer. He chose the people. Samuel nodded. He destroyed years of proof, so thousands of strangers could live. Tears filled Mara's eyes. For years, she had believed her father died trying to expose the truth. Instead, he had sacrificed the truth itself to save lives. Nathan slowly looked toward the recorder in Mara's hands. "That's why he wrote, 'Forgive.'" Samuel smiled sadly. He never wanted revenge. He wanted someone to finish the story without creating another tragedy. Suddenly, Marcus's voice echoed across the cavern. "The western support has failed." A massive section of the ceiling collapsed. Concrete shattered against the ancient crane. The entire chamber lurched violently. Samuel immediately handed the lantern to Mara. "You must leave." Nathan stepped forward. "What about you?" Samuel looked back at the enormous locking mechanism beneath the crane. "I've been guarding this place for 28 years. If the final lock isn't engaged..." The collapse reaches the city above. Elias grabbed Samuel's arm. "We can do it together." Samuel smiled. "We already did." He gently pulled away. Nathan refused to move. "I'm not leaving you." Samuel placed a weathered hand on Nathan's shoulder. "For years, I wondered whether the Archer name still meant something." He looked directly into Nathan's eyes. "Now I know." Nathan's voice cracked. "Grandfather." Samuel embraced him for only a second, then stepped toward the control platform. Steel beams groaned overhead. Emergency alarms screamed through the cavern. Marcus shouted from the catwalk, "Everyone out." Even his own operatives began retreating. Samuel reached the final control wheel. He wrapped both hands around it, then looked back one last time. Daniel carried this burden long enough. Now, let an old man finish what his friend began. The chamber shook with terrifying force. Nathan reached toward him. "Grandfather." Samuel turned the wheel. The ancient mechanism roared to life. Massive steel gates began sealing deep beneath the city. The first shockwave rippled through the cavern. The lights went out. Everything disappeared into darkness. Only Samuel's lantern remained visible. A tiny golden light, growing farther away until it vanished. The light beyond the collapse, the lantern disappeared. Then came the sound. A deep metallic thunder rolled beneath the earth. The final lock had engaged. The entire cavern shook with such force that Nathan lost his footing. "Move." Marcus's voice echoed across the chamber. Chunks of concrete crashed onto the ancient platform. Steel cables snapped one after another. The prototype crane finally surrendered to gravity. With a deafening roar, it collapsed into the darkness below. A massive cloud of dust swallowed everything. Nathan refused to move. His eyes searched desperately through the collapsing chamber. "Grandfather." No answer. Only silence. Mara grabbed his arm. "If we stay, his sacrifice means nothing." Nathan looked at her. For one painful second, he wanted to ignore her. Then Samuel's final words echoed inside his mind. "Now I know." Nathan nodded. They ran. Elias led them through a narrow emergency tunnel hidden behind the control platform. Marcus and his operatives were already helping injured workers instead of chasing them. Mara noticed. "You could still arrest us." Marcus carried a wounded operative over his shoulder. Without looking back, he answered, "Not today. There have been enough enemies." For the first time, Mara saw the exhaustion in his face. Not hatred, not cruelty, only years of impossible choices. The tunnel climbed steadily upward. Behind them, the ancient chamber continued collapsing. The sound gradually faded, until there was only the echo of dripping water. Almost an hour later, a rusted hatch opened. Fresh air rushed inside. They emerged beneath the first light of dawn. Harbor City stretched before them, peaceful, unaware of how close it had come to disaster. Nathan slowly turned toward the harbor. The morning sun reflected across the calm water. Everything looked ordinary, as if nothing had happened beneath the streets. Mara stood beside him. "My father saved all of this. Nathan nodded. So did your grandfather. So did Samuel. Elias quietly corrected him. And now, it's our turn. No one spoke for a long time. The city awakened around them. Fishing boats left the docks. Streetcars began to move. People hurried to work. Children laughed somewhere nearby. Life continued, exactly as Daniel had hoped. Nathan reached inside his jacket. Daniel's letter was still there. Folded carefully, he read the final paragraph for the first time. The words were short, but they changed everything. If this letter reached you, it means Harbor City survived. Do not spend your life proving I was right. Spend it making tomorrow better than yesterday. Nathan folded the letter slowly. Mara smiled through her tears. He always believed tomorrow could be better. Nathan looked toward Archer headquarters, rising above the skyline. Then that's where we begin. Just then, Nathan's phone vibrated. An emergency notification appeared. Breaking news: Archer Industries Board announces immediate resignation of Chairman Victor Halden due to medical emergency. Nathan frowned. Medical emergency. Marcus glanced at the screen. No. That's impossible. Before anyone could respond, a second notification arrived. Victor Halden has disappeared during evacuation procedures. Silence. Mara slowly lowered the phone. He escaped. Elias looked toward the distant city skyline. No. If Victor disappeared, he wanted to. Nathan's expression hardened. Then this isn't over. At that exact moment, hundreds of miles away, a black sedan stopped outside a quiet lakeside cabin. An elderly man stepped out. He walked with the help of a silver-handled cane. Without looking back, Victor Halden entered the cabin alone. Inside, a single photograph rested on the fireplace. It showed two young engineers, Samuel Archer, Victor Halden, standing shoulder to shoulder beside the very first prototype crane. Victor gently picked up the photograph. His hand trembled. He whispered to the empty room, "I'm sorry, Samuel." A tear rolled down his cheek. Then he opened a locked wooden drawer. Inside lay another sealed envelope. Across the front, only one sentence had been written. To Mara Bennett. When the whole truth is finally worth knowing. Victor stared at it, but he did not open it. Instead, he quietly closed the drawer. Outside, the wind carried the sound of distant waves. And for the first time in decades, Victor Halden looked like a man who was no longer running from the past. The letter that should never be opened 3 days passed. Harbor City returned to normal. At least, that's what the headlines claimed. Construction resumed along the waterfront. Morning commuters filled the trains. News helicopters disappeared from the skyline. The collapse beneath the harbor became nothing more than a brief article buried on page 6. Minor underground infrastructure failure. No casualties reported. No further investigation required. Nathan stared at the newspaper before quietly folding it. They buried it. Mara nodded. They've been burying the truth for decades. Nathan looked at the recorder still resting on his desk. Neither of them had pressed play, not yet. Daniel's final request echoed in both their minds. Forgive first. Only then listen. Neither of them believed they were ready. Across the city, Archer Industries was falling apart. Board members argued behind closed doors. Investors demanded answers. Government investigators requested thousands of archived documents. Claire Morgan quietly placed another stack of files onto Nathan's desk. Neither spoke for several moments. Finally, "I'm resigning." Nathan looked up. "You don't owe me that." Claire smiled sadly. "No. I owe myself." She slid a small envelope across the desk. Inside, a cabin address. Nathan immediately recognized it. The lakeside cabin. Victor Halden's last known location. Claire stood. "If you want answers, don't wait too long." Before Nathan could ask another question, she quietly walked away. This time for good. That evening, Nathan and Mara drove north. Rain covered the windshield. Neither of them talked much. The road wound through thick pine forests before ending beside a quiet lake. The cabin stood exactly where Claire had said. Its porch light was still on. Nathan knocked. No answer. He pushed the door open, unlocked inside. Everything remained perfectly organized. A teapot still rested on the stove. A fire had long since burned out. Victor Halden was gone. But he hadn't left in a hurry. He had prepared the place, as if expecting visitors. Mara slowly walked toward the fireplace. The photograph was still there. Samuel Archer. Victor Halden, young, laughing. Building something together. Nathan picked it up. Written on the back, in faded ink, "The future belongs to those who protect people before profit." Mara whispered, "That doesn't sound like the Victor we knew." Nathan nodded, "Maybe. We never knew him." A floorboard creaked beneath Mara's feet. She stopped. "Did you hear that?" Nathan knelt beside her. One loose wooden plank. He carefully lifted it. Beneath the floor, a small iron box. Inside, the sealed envelope. The one addressed to Mara. Nathan looked at her. "It's your decision." For several seconds, she simply stared, then slowly broke the wax seal. Inside, there wasn't a confession. There wasn't evidence. There wasn't a secret document. Only one handwritten letter. Victor's handwriting, steady despite his age. "Mara, if you're reading this, Samuel is probably gone." She stopped reading. The room suddenly felt colder. Nathan gently nodded. "Keep going." She took a slow breath. "Your father once asked me a question I could never answer. If saving thousands requires lying to millions, is it still the right thing? I chose silence. Daniel chose sacrifice. Samuel chose responsibility. For 30 years, I've wondered which of us was truly right." Mara turned the page. Near the bottom, one sentence had been underlined. "I did not kill your father." Silence. Nathan looked up. "What?" Mara continued reading. "The person responsible is someone you've already forgiven." The words hit the room like thunder. Nathan slowly stood. "Elias." Mara immediately shook her head. "No. He wouldn't." Wouldn't he? Both of them remembered. Elias had known too much. He had always appeared at exactly the right moment. He had never once answered a question directly. Nathan grabbed his phone. No signal. The cabin's landline dead. Outside, a car engine suddenly echoed across the lake. Headlights swept across the cabin windows. Someone had arrived. Nathan switched off the lights. The cabin fell into darkness. A vehicle stopped outside. A door opened. Footsteps approached the porch, slow, deliberate. Then 3 firm knocks echoed through the silent cabin. No one spoke. A familiar voice came through the wooden door. "Mara." "It's Elias. We need to talk." Nathan and Mara looked at one another. Neither moved. Then Elias spoke again. His voice was quieter this time. "And before you decide whether to trust me, you deserve to know. I was the last person to see your father alive." The doorknob slowly began to turn. The last witness, Nathan, slowly stepped in front of Mara. The doorknob continued turning. Click. The cabin door opened. Elias Rowan stood in the rain. His gray jacket was soaked. His breathing was heavy. For the first time since Mara had met him, he looked frightened. Not of them. Of running out of time. Nathan didn't lower his guard. "You have 30 seconds. Elias nodded. "Fair enough." He slowly raised both hands. "No weapon. No lies. Not anymore." Mara stared into his tired eyes. "Victor said you were the last person to see my father alive." "I was." "Then tell me." Elias lowered his head. "I failed him." Silence filled the room. Nathan spoke first. "Did you kill Daniel?" Elias looked him directly in the eyes. "If I had, I wouldn't have spent 30 years trying to protect his daughter." No one answered. Somehow, they believed him. But belief wasn't enough anymore. Mara stepped aside. "Come in." Elias entered quietly. He removed a weathered leather pouch from inside his coat. "I've carried this since the night Daniel died." He placed it on the table. Inside, an old pocket watch. Its crystal was cracked. The hands had stopped forever at 11:47 p.m. Mara frowned. "My father never wore a watch." Elias nodded. "It wasn't his. It belonged to the man who tried to save him." Nathan's heartbeat quickened. There was someone else. There were 4 of us. The room fell silent. Samuel, Victor, Daniel, and me. Nathan slowly sat down. No one ever mentioned a 4th person. Elias gave a bitter smile. That was the point. He opened the pocket watch. Hidden inside the cover, a tiny black and white photograph. 4 young engineers stood beside the first prototype crane. Samuel Archer, Victor Halden, Daniel Bennett, and a much younger Elias Rowan, laughing, covered in grease, dreaming about building a better city. Mara gently touched the photograph. They were friends. They were brothers. Elias nodded. Until one night, everything changed. Rain hammered against the cabin windows. Outside, thunder rolled across the lake. Elias took a long breath. The prototype wasn't dangerous. Nathan frowned. What? It never was. Then why did Daniel destroy the evidence? Elias looked toward the recorder still lying on the table. He didn't. Nathan froze. What are you talking about? Elias slowly pointed at the recorder. Daniel never destroyed anything. He hid it. Mara stared at him. The evidence still exists. Elias nodded. Every page, every blueprint, every recording. Nathan whispered, "Where?" Elias looked directly at Mara. Inside that recorder. Silence. Nathan picked it up. "This only plays tapes." Elias smiled sadly. So everyone believed. He turned the recorder upside down. Using his thumbnail, he pressed a nearly invisible brass pin. A hidden compartment slid open. Not another cassette. A tiny brass key rested inside. Mara's eyes widened. A key. Elias nodded. Daniel designed the recorder. He knew someone would eventually find it. Nathan examined the key. The number engraved onto it made his blood run cold. Locker 1. Mara frowned. We already found Locker 27. Elias shook his head. Locker 27 was never the destination. It was the invitation. Nathan slowly looked up. So where is Locker 1? Elias didn't answer. Instead, he unfolded an old city map. The harbor, the rail station, Dock 9, every place they had visited. Then he circled one location. Not underground. Not at Archer Industries. Not at the harbor. A place none of them had considered. Harbor City Public Library. Nathan stared at the map. The library. Elias nodded. The safest place to hide the truth is where everyone believes they've already seen it. Before anyone could speak, the lights inside the cabin suddenly went out. Darkness swallowed the room. The power had failed. A second later, headlights illuminated the windows. Not one vehicle, 3. Nathan slowly pulled back the curtain. Black SUVs surrounded the cabin. Their engines idled quietly. No company logos. No license plates. Men in dark clothing stepped out. Disciplined. Organized, unknown. Mara whispered, "They're not Marcus's people." Elias's face drained of color. "No. They're much worse." One of the strangers walked onto the porch. He didn't knock. He simply placed a small envelope beneath the front door. Then every vehicle drove away. Within seconds, the road was empty again. Nathan carefully opened the door. The envelope contained only a single white card. No signature. No fingerprints. Only 6 printed words. "You found the wrong truth first." The room fell silent. For the first time, they realized something terrifying. Victor Halden hadn't been the final player. The Library of Silent Voices, the library, opened at exactly 8 o'clock. Children hurried toward the reading corner. College students claimed their favorite desks. Retirees quietly unfolded newspapers beside the tall windows. Everything felt ordinary. Too ordinary. Nathan adjusted the collar of his coat. This is the last place anyone would hide a secret. Elias smiled faintly. Exactly. Mara looked around the century-old building. Towering oak shelves stretched toward a stained glass ceiling. Dust floated through shafts of morning sunlight. It smelled of old paper and forgotten stories. Daniel had chosen well. The 3 split up. Nathan headed toward the archive room. Mara searched the basement level. Elias walked directly to the oldest section of the library. He didn't hesitate. He knew exactly where he was going. Nathan noticed. "You've been here 100 times." Elias gently ran his hand across a bookshelf. "I promised Daniel I'd never touch Locker 1. Unless he couldn't." Meanwhile, Mara reached the basement. Rows of old storage lockers lined one brick wall. Most were labeled Staff Archives. Maintenance. But there was no Locker 1. Only lockers beginning with number 12. She frowned. "It isn't here." Nathan joined her a minute later. "We're missing something." Elias slowly walked into the room. He looked around, then laughed quietly. "What?" Nathan asked. "You've been looking at lockers," Daniel always said. The first lock is never where people expect. Elias pointed toward the librarian's wooden desk upstairs. Come. The head librarian looked up as they approached. She appeared to be in her late 60s. Silver hair, kind eyes, a navy cardigan with a tiny brass library pin. She smiled warmly. Can I help you? Elias removed the small brass key. For a brief moment, the woman's smile disappeared. Only for a second. Then it returned. I was wondering when someone would bring that back. Nathan's pulse quickened. You know what this is? She nodded. My name is Margaret Ellis. I've been keeping it safe for 30 years. Silence. Mara stepped forward. You knew my father. Margaret smiled sadly. He spent more time in this library than anyone else. He believed knowledge should outlive fear. Without another word, she unlocked a narrow wooden cabinet hidden behind her desk. Inside, there was no locker, only an old-fashioned brass keyhole. Elias carefully inserted Daniel's key. Click. A section of the bookshelf slowly swung outward. Behind it, a tiny room, no larger than a storage closet. Yet every wall was covered with journals, photographs, blueprints, maps, boxes. Hundreds of them. Nathan whispered, "This is impossible." Margaret answered softly, "No. This is what history looks like before it's edited." Mara carefully picked up one journal. Its cover read, "The Harbor Project." She opened it. Inside, Daniel's handwriting filled every page. Dates, sketches, engineering calculations, personal notes. One sentence had been circled repeatedly. The danger isn't beneath the city. The danger is who controls the city. Nathan slowly turned another page. There were photographs, secret meetings, financial records, company mergers, political donations. Nothing illegal by itself. But together, a pattern emerged. Daniel hadn't uncovered an accident. He had uncovered a system. One designed to quietly control Harbor City's future for generations. Nathan looked stunned. This wasn't about Archer Industries. Elias nodded. It never was. It was about everyone. Mara opened another box. Inside, a cassette tape. Unlike the others, this one carried no label. Only today's date. She frowned. Today's date. Nathan looked closer. That's impossible. Daniel couldn't have written today's date. Margaret's expression changed. She slowly stepped backward. No. Her voice trembled. It wasn't here yesterday. The room fell silent. Elias immediately reached for the tape. Before he could touch it, a tiny red light began blinking inside the cassette. Nathan's eyes widened. Don't. Too late. A soft electronic beep echoed through the hidden room. 3 seconds later, every emergency alarm inside the library erupted at once. Students screamed. Books tumbled from shelves. Automatic fire doors slammed shut. The public address system crackled. But instead of an evacuation announcement, a calm computerized voice echoed through every floor. Identity confirmed. Welcome back, Mara Bennett. Mara froze. Nathan stared at her. The voice continued. Final protocol has begun. Then, the hidden room's back wall slowly split open, revealing a staircase descending even deeper beneath the library. Cold air drifted upward, carrying with it the unmistakable smell of seawater. Elias whispered, "No." Daniel built another passage, Margaret closed her eyes. He always planned for this day. From somewhere below, a single light flickered on, as though someone had been waiting in the darkness. The room Daniel never wanted anyone to find. The staircase spiraled downward, not like the industrial tunnels beneath Archer Industries. This place felt older. The walls were built from weathered stone. Iron lanterns lined the passage. None of them should have been burning. Yet each flame flickered steadily, as if someone had lit them only moments ago. No one spoke. Every footstep echoed through the narrow corridor. Nathan counted instinctively. 37 steps. 53. 79. Finally, the passage opened into a circular chamber. At its center stood a single wooden table. Nothing else. No computers, no vault. No surveillance equipment. Only one chair. And one envelope. Mara walked toward it. Across the front, written in familiar handwriting, were 5 simple words. For the person who kept walking. She stopped. It's his handwriting. Nathan nodded. But this wasn't left for you. Mara looked at him. It was left for whoever refused to give up. She carefully unfolded the letter. The ink had faded slightly with time. Yet every word remained perfectly clear. If you've reached this room, then you already know enough to hate someone. Please don't. Nathan lowered his eyes. Daniel's words carried no anger, only quiet exhaustion. Mara continued reading. Hatred is the easiest inheritance to pass to the next generation. Breaking it is much harder. A long silence settled over the room. Even Elias seemed unable to breathe. Suddenly, Nathan noticed something carved into the wooden table. A city map. Hand-carved. Every street. Every dock. Every bridge. At the very center, a small brass compass had been embedded into the wood. The needle wasn't pointing north. It pointed toward the eastern wall. Nathan stepped closer. There. He pressed against the stone. Nothing happened. Then Mara placed Daniel's recorder beside the compass. A soft metallic click echoed through the chamber. The eastern wall slowly rotated inward. Behind it, a hidden workshop, small, simple, beautifully organized. Blueprints covered the walls. Half-finished inventions rested on workbenches. Old coffee mugs. Pencils worn down to stubs. Engineering notebooks stacked neatly in wooden crates. Everything looked lived in, as though Daniel had simply stepped outside for lunch. Mara walked slowly across the room. Her fingers brushed over the edge of the workbench. There, scratched into the wood, were tiny pencil marks. Each marked a different year, age 5, age 6, age 7. She smiled through tears. He measured my height. Nathan looked around. He brought you here. When you were little. Mara nodded. I don't remember. Elias answered quietly. He wanted this place to belong to you. After the world became safe. Nathan picked up one of Daniel's notebooks. Inside were dozens of unfinished ideas. Affordable flood barriers. Portable water purification systems. Emergency bridge designs. Low-cost housing concepts. None of them were weapons. None of them promised wealth. Every project solved a problem ordinary people faced. Nathan whispered he could have become one of the richest engineers in the country. Elias smiled sadly. He stopped asking, "How much can this earn?" He started asking, "How many lives can this save?" On the far wall hung a framed photograph. Not of Archer Industries. Not of Harbor City. Just 4 friends sitting on a dock at sunset. Samuel, Victor, Daniel, Elias, young, laughing. Covered in grease after a day's work. On the back, someone had written, "Build things that outlive your pride." Nathan stared at the photograph for a long time, then quietly slipped it into his backpack. "It belongs with us now." Mara opened the final notebook on the desk. Only 1 page had been written. No diagrams. No calculations. Just 1 unfinished sentence. "If one day my daughter asks whether I was a hero." The rest of the page was blank. Mara stood frozen. Nathan gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "He never finished it." She slowly shook her head. "No. He didn't need to." A single tear landed on the empty page. Without warning, the lights in the workshop flickered. Margaret looked toward the entrance. Did anyone touch the alarm system? No. Nathan answered then. A hidden speaker crackled to life. Unlike every message before, this voice was unfamiliar, young, confident, cold. "If you're hearing this, then you've entered a room that was never part of Daniel Bennett's plan." Everyone froze. The voice continued. "You've spent weeks searching for the truth, but you've only uncovered the history." A monitor slowly descended from the ceiling. Static filled the screen, then a silhouette appeared, its face hidden in shadow. Only 1 detail stood out. A silver ring engraved with an unfamiliar symbol. The stranger leaned toward the camera. "My name doesn't matter. What matters is that I was Daniel Bennett's first apprentice." Mara stared at the screen. "I've never heard of you." The figure smiled. "No. Because Daniel spent 30 years making sure you never would." The screen went black. A printer hidden beneath the workbench suddenly came to life. 1 sheet of paper slowly emerged. Nathan picked it up. At the top, in bold black letters, Project Horizon below it. A single line. Phase 1 begins tomorrow. Project Horizon. No one spoke. Nathan read the document again. Then a 3rd time. The words hadn't changed. Project Horizon Phase 1 begins tomorrow. The paper felt new. Fresh ink. Fresh folds. Someone had placed it there. Hours ago. Not decades. Nathan slowly lowered the page. "We're not chasing history anymore. We're chasing someone who's still moving." The monitor flickered back to life. The shadowed figure remained seated. His face hidden. His voice calm. "You finally caught up." Mara stepped closer. "If you were Daniel's apprentice, why hide?" The man chuckled. "Because your father asked me to." Silence. "He said one day you'd come looking for him. And if that day ever arrived, you deserved answers." Nathan frowned. "Then give them." The man leaned back. "No. You've spent 20 years asking the wrong question." Mara's heartbeat quickened. "What should I be asking?" The figure answered immediately. "Not who killed Daniel Bennett, but why did Daniel choose to disappear before he died?" The room fell silent. Nathan looked toward Elias. Even he appeared shocked. "What does that mean?" The screen went black again. Margaret slowly sat down. "I hoped that recording had been destroyed." Nathan turned. "You know him?" She nodded reluctantly. "I knew him as Lucas. Daniel called him the brightest engineer he'd ever trained. Mara whispered, "Lucas." Margaret continued, "He was brilliant. He could solve problems nobody else could, but he believed every problem had only one correct answer." Elias sighed. Daniel disagreed. He believed people mattered more than perfect solutions. Nathan looked around Daniel's workshop. Everything suddenly felt different. The unfinished inventions, the notebooks, the abandoned tools. This wasn't the workshop of a man preparing to die. It was the workshop of someone planning years ahead. He walked toward a drafting table. One blueprint remained pinned beneath a brass ruler. Across the top, Daniel had written, "Harbor Renewal Initiative." Nathan carefully unrolled it. His eyes widened. "This looks exactly like Project Horizon. Roads, flood barriers, parks, renewable power stations, public housing, schools. Everything Project Horizon promised already existed here, designed 30 years earlier." Mara slowly understood. They stole his vision. Nathan nodded and changed the name. Suddenly, Elias froze. He stared at one corner of the blueprint. "No." Nathan followed his gaze. A tiny handwritten note, barely visible. "Not complete without lighthouse." "Lighthouse?" Nathan asked. Margaret closed her eyes. "I prayed he'd never leave that clue." Mara looked confused. "What is lighthouse?" No one answered. Then a distant church bell rang. Exactly 12 times. Margaret looked toward the old clock on the workshop wall. Midnight. Her face turned pale. "We're too late." Nathan frowned. "For what?" Margaret whispered, "Phase 1 has already begun." At that exact moment, across Harbor City, streetlights flickered, traffic signals shut down, cell phone service vanished. One neighborhood after another disappeared into darkness. People stepped outside their homes, confused, looking toward the skyline. The lights inside Archer headquarters remained on. Everything else went black. Nathan's phone buzzed. "Emergency alert. Citywide infrastructure failure cause unknown." Mara looked toward the workshop entrance. "That's impossible." Elias quietly shook his head. "No, there isn't." He looked at Daniel's blueprint. Lucas finally built it. Nathan grabbed the map. "Where's lighthouse?" Margaret hesitated, then slowly walked toward a bookshelf. She removed a single book. The shelf slid aside. Behind it, another map. Not of Harbor City, of the coastline. One location had been marked with blue ink. An abandoned lighthouse, miles beyond the harbor cliffs. Nathan looked at the name. Blackwater Point Lighthouse. Margaret whispered, "Daniel never called it a lighthouse. He called it the city's heartbeat." The monitor suddenly came alive one last time. Lucas's silhouette filled the screen. He smiled, not cruelly, almost proudly. "If you're holding Daniel's map, then you've earned the right to try." He glanced at his watch. "You have exactly 8 hours." Nathan stepped closer. 8 hours until what? Lucas answered with complete certainty. "Until Harbor City becomes the first city in the world to belong to an algorithm." The connection ended. Silence consumed the workshop. Nathan slowly folded Daniel's blueprint. Mara picked up the recorder. Elias reached for his old coat. No one needed to say it. They all knew where they were going next. The lighthouse. The place Daniel had hidden. Not his past, but his future. The lighthouse that never went dark. The road to Blackwater Point was empty. No traffic. No police. No emergency vehicles. It was as if the rest of Harbor City had forgotten the lighthouse even existed. Nathan drove in silence. Rain lashed against the windshield. Far ahead, a single beam of white light swept across the ocean. Back and forth, steady, alive. Mara frowned. I thought this lighthouse was abandoned. Elias stared through the window. It was. Nathan glanced at him. Then who's keeping the light on? No one answered. 30 minutes later, the road ended at a rusted iron gate. A weathered sign leaned crookedly in the wind. Blackwater Point closed to the public since 1998. The lock hanging from the gate had already been cut. Recently. Nathan touched the metal. Still warm. They are here. The group climbed the cliffside path. The storm grew stronger. Waves exploded against the rocks hundreds of feet below. Lightning illuminated the old lighthouse. It towered above them like a lonely guardian. Despite its age, every window glowed softly. Someone had restored it. Someone had been living there. As they reached the entrance, the heavy wooden door slowly opened. By itself inside, warm light spilled across the stone floor. A woman's voice echoed from somewhere above. I've been expecting you. Everyone froze. Mara looked toward the spiral staircase. Who are you? The voice replied calmly, a promise. The four climbed to the top floor. The lantern room overlooked the entire coastline. Standing beside the enormous lighthouse lens was an elderly woman. She wore a thick gray sweater and work gloves stained with machine oil. Her silver hair was tied neatly behind her head. She smiled the moment she saw Mara. You look just like your mother. Mara's breath caught. You knew my parents. The woman nodded. I knew the people they were. Before history turned them into legends. Nathan stepped forward. And you are. She extended her hand. Helen Brooks. The last engineer Daniel ever trusted. Silence filled the room. Elias slowly removed his glasses. Helen. I thought you left the country. Helen smiled. I let everyone believe that. She walked toward the center of the room. There. An enormous brass mechanism stretched beneath the lighthouse floor. Hundreds of gears rotated silently. Nathan stared in disbelief. This isn't a lighthouse. Helen nodded. No. It never was. She gently rested her hand on one of the gears. This is Harbor City's original control station. Mara looked confused. Control station. Helen pulled a faded cloth away from an old console. Rows of analog switches. Pressure gauges. Mechanical computers. Everything connected through copper cables, disappearing into the cliffs below. Helen spoke quietly. Long before digital systems. Everything passed through here. Power. Flood barriers. Emergency communications. Harbor warning systems. Daniel called it the city's heartbeat. Nathan whispered, so Lucas wants this place. Helen interrupted, no. He already has it. The room fell silent. Nathan felt his stomach tighten. What do you mean? Helen pointed toward a blinking green indicator. 3 hours ago, someone remotely activated Horizon. She looked directly at Nathan. The city isn't being attacked. It's being transferred. Every essential system. is handing control to a self-learning network. Mara slowly shook her head. Lucas wants to control Harbor City. Helen sighed, no. He wants to remove people from the decision-making process. He believes machines never betray. Nathan looked toward the giant lighthouse lens. But Daniel disagreed. Helen smiled sadly. He said something I'll never forget. She closed her eyes, then repeated his words. A machine can calculate the safest answer. Only a human can choose the kindest one. Silence. Even Elias lowered his head. Suddenly, the lighthouse shook violently. A deep mechanical vibration rolled beneath the cliffs. One by one, the brass gears began turning faster. Warning bells rang throughout the tower. Helen rushed toward the control console. No. It's happening early. Nathan ran beside her. What do we do? Helen pulled open a steel drawer. Inside, 3 identical brass keys, each engraved with a different symbol, a wave, a compass, a lighthouse. She handed 1 key to Mara, 1 to Nathan. She kept the 3rd. Daniel designed a manual override. It requires 3 people. Nathan looked at the keys. Where? Helen pointed toward 3 massive locks surrounding the lighthouse lens. Turn them together. Exactly at sunrise. Mara looked out the window. The horizon was still dark. How long do we have? Helen checked the old mechanical clock mounted on the wall, then quietly answered. Less than 40 minutes. Before anyone could move. Every light inside the lighthouse suddenly turned red. A calm electronic voice echoed from hidden speakers. Authorization denied. Manual override detected. Welcome, Helen Brooks. Helen slowly closed her eyes. He found us then. The giant lighthouse doors slammed shut. Steel bolts locked into place. The tower had become a prison. 3 keys before sunrise red emergency lights bathed the lighthouse in a crimson glow. The steady white beam that had guided ships for generations vanished. Outside, dark waves crashed against the cliffs. Inside, a countdown appeared on the old mechanical display. 00:39:42. Nathan stared at it. It knows exactly how much time we have. Helen nodded. Lucas designed that system himself. Mara tightened her grip around the brass key. Then he also knows we're trapped. He does. And that's exactly what he wanted. A heavy vibration shook the tower. Somewhere below, massive gears began rotating. Not slowly, violently. The lighthouse itself was transforming. Stone walls groaned. Hidden steel doors slid into place. Escape routes disappeared one after another. Nathan looked toward the staircase. It's sealing every floor. Helen answered calmly. The tower isn't becoming a prison. It has always been one. Nathan hurried toward the first lock, beneath the giant lighthouse lens. He inserted the compass-shaped key. Nothing happened. He tried again. Still nothing. It won't turn. Helen walked beside him. Daniel never trusted keys. Nathan frowned. What? He trusted people. She pointed toward 3 brass plates surrounding the mechanism. Each carried a different inscription. Truth, mercy, courage, Mara whispered. They're not labels. They are instructions. Elias approached the second lock. His eyes suddenly widened. This wasn't here before. A small envelope had been wedged beneath the brass plate. Fresh paper. Fresh ink. Nathan immediately opened it. Only one sentence. One of you must choose not to turn your key. Silence. Everyone looked at one another. Helen slowly shook her head. No. Daniel would never design something like this. Nathan, read the note again. Different handwriting. Not Daniel's, Lucas. He wants us to doubt each other. The countdown continued. 00:31:08 outside. The first district of Harbor City went completely dark. Emergency sirens echoed across the bay. Nathan's phone vibrated. Power grid offline Eastern District. Another alert followed. Flood barrier control switched to autonomous mode. Helen's face turned pale. If Horizon reaches 100%, no human will ever regain control. Mara walked toward the enormous lighthouse lens. It rotated slowly, projecting a faint beam toward the sea. Then, she noticed something strange. Tiny scratches covered the brass frame. Not damage, letters. She brushed away decades of dust. Daniel had carved a message so small it was almost invisible. Look through the light. Nathan immediately climbed the maintenance ladder. Standing beside the giant lens, he looked through its center. The sunrise had not yet begun. Only darkness then. A distant reflection flashed across the ocean. Once, twice, 3 times. Nathan focused. Far beyond the cliffs. Another lighthouse. Abandoned, no, hidden. Its light answered this one in perfect rhythm. Helen gasped. There were 2. Elias whispered, I never knew. Helen smiled faintly. Only Daniel and I did. Nathan climbed down. The override isn't here. Helen nodded. This tower was only half of the system. Mara looked toward the sea. So where's the other half? Helen quietly answered, on Raven Isle. Nathan unfolded the coastal map. The tiny island lay nearly 5 miles offshore. No bridge, no ferry, nothing. We'll never make it before sunrise. Before despair could settle. A deep horn echoed through the storm, once. Then again. Everyone rushed to the window. Below the cliffs, an old rescue boat cut through the crashing waves. Its spotlight swept across the lighthouse. The captain raised one hand. Marcus Cole. Nathan couldn't believe it. Marcus grabbed the radio. His voice crackled through the emergency speaker. I figured you'd need a ride. For the first time in days. Nathan smiled. Suddenly, every screen inside the lighthouse activated. Lucas appeared once more. Only this time, his face was finally visible. He looked no older than 40, calm, sharp-eyed, almost gentle. You finally found Raven Isle. He folded his hands. I hoped you would. Nathan frowned. You want us to go there? Lucas nodded. Because that's where Daniel made his greatest mistake. Mara stepped toward the screen. My father didn't make mistakes. Lucas looked directly at her. No. He trusted me. Silence. Lucas's expression softened. And I loved him like my own father. Nathan could hardly breathe. What happened? Lucas looked away. For 30 years. I've been trying to finish the future. He was too afraid to build. The screen went black. The countdown continued. 00:24:16. Nathan looked toward the storm. Toward Marcus's waiting boat. Then toward Mara. We're going. Mara nodded without hesitation. Together, as the lighthouse doors slowly unlocked, The first rays of dawn began coloring the eastern horizon. Time was almost gone. The island beyond the storm, the rescue boat slammed against another wave. Spray exploded over the windshield. Marcus kept one hand on the wheel. The other gripped the throttle. No one spoke. The storm was too loud. The countdown on Nathan's phone continued. 00, 21, 37, 21 minutes until sunrise. 21 minutes before Project Horizon completed its transfer. Marcus broke the silence. Raven Isle doesn't appear on modern navigation charts. Nathan looked up. Why? Marcus kept his eyes on the sea. Because someone erased it. Lightning flashed across the horizon. For one brief second, the island appeared. Black cliffs, towering pine trees, an enormous lighthouse rising above them. Unlike Blackwater Point, this lighthouse had never guided ships. Its windows were completely dark. Helen whispered. Daniel called this place the Keeper. Mara frowned. Keeper of what? Helen answered quietly. Choice. The boat reached a narrow stone dock. Old ropes still hung from weathered posts. Someone had maintained them recently. Marcus shut off the engine. I'll stay with the boat. Nathan shook his head. No. Marcus looked toward the lighthouse. If Lucas planned all this, he planned for resistance. He reached beneath the captain's seat. Not for a weapon. For a weathered toolbox. Daniel's initials had been carved into the lid. D.B. Marcus smiled faintly. He left this with me 28 years ago. He said, one day, someone better than us will need it. Nathan accepted the box without another word. The climb to the lighthouse was steep. The rain had almost stopped. Only the wind remained. As they reached the entrance, the heavy iron door stood open, waiting inside. The air was warm. The lights were already on. Someone was there. Nathan stepped inside first. The circular hall looked almost identical to Blackwater Point. Except for one thing. There were no machines, no gears. No control panels. Only books. Thousands of books. Shelves stretched from floor to ceiling. Engineering. Philosophy, history. Psychology, ethics. Economics. Mara slowly turned in a circle. This isn't a control room. Helen smiled. No. It's a classroom. A voice echoed from above. I'm glad you came. Lucas stepped into the light. For the first time, he stood before them in person. No screens. No shadows. No distance. He looked remarkably ordinary. A navy jacket. Simple boots. A notebook tucked beneath one arm. He could have been any professor walking across a university campus. Nathan stared at him. You've been expecting us. Lucas nodded. For 30 years. Mara stepped forward. You knew my father. Lucas smiled. I admired him. I argued with him. I disappointed him. And in the end, I failed him. Nathan placed Daniel's toolbox on the floor. Lucas noticed it immediately. His smile disappeared. He kept it. Marcus answered from the doorway. He trusted people more than plans. Lucas lowered his eyes. That was always Daniel. Without warning, Lucas walked to one of the bookshelves. He removed a single journal. Its cover was worn from decades of use. He handed it to Mara. This belonged to your father. She opened it slowly. It wasn't an engineering notebook. It was a diary. Daniel's private journal. The first page read if Lucas ever reads this. I hope he forgives me. Lucas quietly looked away. Mara turned another page. There were no technical drawings. Only conversations. Questions, doubts, dreams. One passage caught her attention. Lucas believes perfect systems will save humanity. I believe imperfect people still deserve the chance to choose. She looked up. So that's what divided you? Lucas nodded, no. What divided us, it was time. Nathan frowned. What does that mean? Lucas walked toward the lighthouse window. He looked out across Harbor City, far beyond the sea. When Daniel was alive, people still trusted each other. He turned back slowly. I built Horizon because that world disappeared. Silence. No one interrupted him. I watched corruption destroy governments. I watched greed bury discoveries. I watched good people remain silent. His voice never rose. Yet every word carried years of loneliness. So I asked myself, what if kindness no longer depended on human decisions? Nathan answered quietly. It wouldn't be kindness anymore. Lucas looked directly at him. Exactly. For the first time. He smiled. A genuine smile. You finally understand why Daniel believed he could still stop me. A soft chime echoed through the lighthouse. Helen looked at her watch. The countdown. 00:12:05. Only 12 minutes remained. Lucas walked toward the center of the room. He gently placed his silver ring on an old wooden table. I never invited you here to fight. Nathan frowned. Then why? Lucas looked at Mara. Because only Daniel's daughter has the right to decide whether Horizon lives or dies. The floor beneath the table suddenly split apart. A circular platform slowly rose from below. At its center, a single brass lever. Above it, 2 engraved words. Activate, cancel, no passwords. No weapons. No complicated machinery, just one choice. Lucas stepped back. I won't touch it. He looked at Mara. Neither will anyone else. Outside, the first edge of the sun appeared above the horizon. Time was almost gone. The decision only a human could make. No one moved. The brass lever stood between 2 engraved words. Activate, cancel. The first rays of sunlight filtered through the lighthouse windows. The countdown continued. 00:11:58. Lucas folded his hands behind his back. I won't influence your choice. Mara looked at him. You already have. Lucas lowered his eyes. Perhaps. But not anymore. Silence settled over the room. Nathan stepped beside Mara. You don't have to decide alone. She smiled faintly. I know. But I have to live with it. Helen slowly approached the wooden table. She placed Daniel's old journal beside the lever. Then quietly opened the final page. Unlike the others, it wasn't blank. Hidden beneath the last sheet, a folded note slipped onto the table. Mara carefully unfolded it. The handwriting was unmistakable. Daniel. It read, if the future ever asks you to choose between control and compassion, choose compassion. Because people cannot become better if they are never allowed to make mistakes. No one spoke. Lucas read the words. His shoulders dropped. Almost imperceptibly. Nathan looked around the room. Lucas. If you already knew what Daniel believed, why keep fighting him after he was gone? Lucas stared toward the sea. For years, I thought I was honoring him. I finished every design. I built every system. I solved every equation. He laughed quietly. And then one day, I realized I had built everything, except the one thing Daniel cared about most. Mara asked softly, "What was that?" Lucas looked directly at her. "Trust." The countdown reached 00:08:14 suddenly. Every screen inside the lighthouse came alive. Live camera feeds from Harbor City appeared. Hospitals switching to backup generators. Police officers directing traffic by hand. Neighbors helping elderly residents cross dark intersections. Restaurant owners giving away food before it spoiled. Volunteers carrying flashlights through subway stations. People. Helping people. Without orders. Without algorithms. Lucas watched in silence. His expression slowly changed. Nathan spoke quietly. Daniel believed this would happen. Lucas whispered, "I didn't." A tear rolled down Lucas's face. The first anyone had ever seen. "I spent 30 years preparing for humanity's failure, and never noticed its quiet victories." Helen smiled gently. "That's because goodness rarely makes headlines." The countdown continued. 00:04:56. A low mechanical rumble echoed beneath the lighthouse. The system awaited its final command. Lucas stepped back further still, until he stood beside the window. "I'm done deciding for other people." He looked at Mara. "The future belongs to your generation now." Mara placed one hand on the brass lever. She closed her eyes. Memories flooded her mind. Her father's smile. Samuel's lantern disappearing into darkness. Victor's regret. Marcus choosing mercy. Margaret protecting the truth. Helen waiting decades. Nathan refusing to give up. Even Lucas, who had spent half his life trying to save humanity, by forgetting what made humanity worth saving. She slowly opened her eyes, then she pushed the lever down toward cancel. For one terrifying second. Nothing happened then. The lighthouse trembled. Every gear stopped. Every warning light faded. The crimson glow disappeared. Outside, across Harbor City, streetlights slowly returned. Traffic signals blinked back to life. Hospital systems restarted. The harbor cranes awakened one by one. The city breathed again. The countdown vanished. A single message appeared across every monitor. Project Horizon canceled by human authorization. Lucas stared at the screen, then quietly smiled. "Daniel, you were right." Without another word, Lucas removed the silver ring from his finger. He placed it beside Daniel's journal. "I don't deserve to lead this future." Nathan picked up the ring. "No. You deserve to help build it." Lucas looked surprised. Nathan smiled. That's what Daniel would have said. For the first time in decades, Lucas laughed. A genuine laugh. Free of bitterness. Free of regret. Outside, the sun finally rose above the ocean. Its golden light filled the lighthouse, not as a symbol of victory, but as a promise that every new day would always begin with another choice. 1 year later, 1 year passed. Harbor City looked different, not because new skyscrapers had appeared, not because technology had advanced. It looked different because people had changed. Children played in parks that had once been abandoned lots. Flood barriers built from Daniel Bennett's forgotten blueprints protected neighborhoods that had flooded for generations. Community workshops replaced abandoned warehouses. Engineers worked alongside volunteers. Teachers advised architects. Retired mechanics mentored young inventors. No one called it Project Horizon. The city had given it another name: the Bennett Initiative. Nathan stood quietly on the balcony of Archer Industries. The company logo still hung above the entrance, but everything beneath it had changed. The executive floor had become an open engineering center. Profit reports no longer opened weekly meetings. Community impact did. Claire Morgan smiled as she handed Nathan a report. 300 scholarship applications. Nathan looked up. Already. Claire laughed. Daniel inspired more people than he ever knew. Nathan looked toward the city skyline. I think he always hoped someone else would finish what he started. Across town, Myra unlocked the door to a small workshop. It wasn't hidden. It wasn't secret. Large windows overlooked the street. Children could see everything inside. On the wall hung a simple wooden sign: the Daniel Bennett Community Lab, no admission fee. No memberships. Only one sentence painted beneath the logo: build something that helps someone else. Young students filled the room. Some designed inexpensive wheelchairs. Others built water filters. One little girl nervously approached Mara. I don't think my invention is good enough. Mara smiled. My father used to say. She paused, then corrected herself. I say. The first version only has one job. The little girl looked up. What job? To give you the courage to build the second one. The girl grinned and hurried back to her workbench. Meanwhile, Lucas quietly repaired an old bicycle outside the workshop. No cameras followed him. No reporters recognized him. He never accepted interviews. Never defended himself. Never tried to rewrite history. Every morning, he simply fixed broken things: bicycles, generators, water pumps, whatever people carried through the door. One afternoon, a young boy asked him, were you always an engineer? Lucas smiled. No. I became one. The day I realized solving problems was easier than understanding people. The boy laughed. So what are you now? Lucas looked toward the workshop where children were laughing. I'm still learning. Marcus Cole had retired. He bought a small fishing boat. Most mornings, he could be found helping stranded sailors reach shore before sunrise. People often thanked him. He always answered the same way. I spent too many years protecting buildings. It's time I started protecting people. Elias finally published Daniel's journals. Not as a biography. Not as a story about heroes. The title was simple: Choosing Kindness inside the first page. He dedicated the book to 4 names: Samuel Archer, Victor Halden, Daniel Bennett, and the people who taught us that the future is built one choice at a time. As evening settled over Harbor City, Mara climbed the hill overlooking Blackwater Point Lighthouse. The beacon still turned slowly across the ocean. Its light swept over the waves, just as it always had. She reached into her pocket. Daniel's old recorder. It had never been played, not once. Nathan joined her. You still haven't listened. She nodded. I don't need to. Nathan looked surprised. Why? Mara smiled at the lighthouse. Because I already know what he wanted to say. The wind carried the sound of distant waves. Far below, the city lights shimmered peacefully. Nathan looked toward the horizon. Do you think he'll ever be forgotten? Mara watched the lighthouse beam disappear into the night. Before returning again, she smiled. Not as long as someone chooses compassion. When control seems easier. The lighthouse completed another slow turn. Its warm light crossed the sea. And somewhere beyond the darkness, a new generation had already begun building tomorrow. The letter no one was supposed to read 5 years later. The Daniel Bennett Community Lab had become one of the most respected innovation centers in the country. Every summer, hundreds of young inventors traveled to Harbor City. Not to compete, to collaborate. There were no trophies, no rankings. Only one question posted above the entrance. Who will your invention help? Mara refused to remove it. She said the day people started building for applause instead of purpose, the lab would lose its soul. Nathan had changed too. His gray hair had begun to appear around his temples. He no longer introduced himself as the CEO of Archer Industries. When people asked what he did, he smiled and answered, I help good ideas survive. Most people thought he was joking. He wasn't. One rainy afternoon, a delivery truck stopped outside the laboratory. The driver carried a small wooden crate. No return address. No company logo. Only one handwritten instruction. For Mara Bennett. She frowned. I wasn't expecting anything. Neither was anyone else. Inside the crate lay an old leather satchel. The leather had faded with age. The brass buckle was scratched. Mara recognized it immediately. Her father's field bag. The one he always carried during inspections. She had searched for it for years. She slowly opened it. Inside were only 3 things. A fountain pen, a folded map, and a sealed envelope. Across the front, in Daniel's familiar handwriting. Open only after you've stopped looking for me. Mara's hands trembled. Nathan looked at her. Are you ready? She stared at the envelope for a long moment, then smiled softly. I think I've been ready for years. She carefully broke the wax seal. Inside, there was only one sheet of paper. No engineering notes. No hidden codes. No unfinished project. Just a letter. Dear Mara, if you're reading this, then something wonderful has happened. You finally stopped trying to become my daughter and started becoming yourself. If I left you inventions, you would protect them. If I left you money, you would spend it. But if I left you questions, you would never stop growing. Don't build monuments for me. Build opportunities for people who will never know my name. That's enough. That's always been enough. Love, Dad. The room remained silent. No one spoke. No one needed to. Mara folded the letter carefully. She didn't cry. Not this time. Instead, she laughed. A quiet, peaceful laugh. Nathan looked at her. What? She shook her head. All these years, I thought he was leaving me answers. She looked around the laboratory filled with young inventors. He was leaving me permission. That evening, Mara walked into the main workshop. She climbed onto a small wooden platform. The students stopped working. She held up Daniel's letter, then quietly dropped it into the laboratory fireplace. The paper curled. The ink disappeared into the flames. A young student gasped. Why did you burn it? Mara smiled. Because it already did its job. Outside, the rain stopped. Sunlight broke through the clouds. Somewhere nearby, a young girl proudly carried her first invention toward the testing table. No one noticed, except Mara. She smiled. Daniel's greatest invention had never been a machine. It had always been the courage he inspired in others. The boy who failed every test 8 years later. The Daniel Bennett Community Lab had become a place where impossible ideas were welcomed. People arrived from every corner of the country. Some brought sketches. Some brought prototypes. Some brought nothing but hope. Above the entrance, the old wooden sign still remained. Build something that helps someone else. No sponsor logos. No advertisements. No promises of fame. Only purpose. On the first Monday of autumn, a skinny 16-year-old boy pushed open the front door. His backpack was patched together with different pieces of fabric. Rainwater dripped from his worn sneakers. He hesitated before stepping inside. Children younger than him confidently carried robots, drones, and mechanical arms across the workshop. He almost turned around. A volunteer noticed him. First time. The boy nodded. My name is Owen. What did you bring? He slowly unzipped his backpack. Inside, nothing. The volunteer smiled kindly. That's okay. Owen lowered his head. No. It's not. Across the room, Mara was helping a group of students build a portable water purifier. She glanced toward the entrance. Something about the boy caught her attention. Not because he looked frightened, because he kept studying every invention before taking another step. He wasn't impressed. He was learning. She walked over. I'm Mara, Owen. What are you hoping to build? He hesitated. I don't know yet. Most people expected disappointment. Instead, Mara smiled. Good. He blinked. Good. The people who think they already have all the answers usually stop asking the right questions. Over the next few days, Owen tried everything. Electronics, programming, mechanical design, woodworking. Every project failed. His circuits burned out. His software crashed. His gears jammed. Some students whispered, "He'll quit before the weekend." Owen heard every word. He never answered. He simply cleaned his workbench and started over. On Friday afternoon, the lab hosted its weekly demonstration. One by one, students presented inventions that solved real-world problems. Automatic irrigation systems, low-cost medical sensors, emergency rescue drones. Applause filled the room. Finally, only Owen remained. He walked slowly toward the stage, empty-handed. A few students exchanged confused looks. One even laughed quietly. The host smiled politely. Owen, would you like to explain your project? He nodded. My project failed. Silence. He continued. So I brought something else. He unfolded a notebook. Every page was filled with sketches, crossed out ideas, mistakes, measurements, notes, hundreds of failures. I wanted everyone to see what success actually looks like before it works. The room became completely silent. Even the students who had laughed stopped smiling. Mara stepped onto the stage. She gently took the notebook. She flipped through page after page. Every mistake had a lesson written beside it. Every failed prototype had a new solution underneath. She looked at Owen. Who taught you to keep going? He shrugged. No one. I just couldn't think of anything better to do. For a long moment, Mara didn't speak. Then she walked toward the display cabinet at the center of the lab. Inside, behind protective glass, sat Daniel Bennett's old fountain pen. She unlocked the cabinet, carefully removed it, and placed it in Owen's hand. The room gasped. Nathan, watching from the back of the hall, smiled quietly. No one had touched that pen in 8 years. Mara looked at the young inventor. My father believed ideas change the world. She paused. I believe persistence changes the people who create those ideas. Owen stared at the pen. I can't accept this. Mara smiled. It isn't a reward. It's a reminder. As the audience applauded, Nathan noticed something lying beneath Owen's notebook. A faded photograph. He bent down and picked it up. It showed a much younger Daniel Bennett, standing beside a little boy. Nathan frowned. He quietly turned the photograph over. On the back, someone had written only 4 words. Find him when ready. Nathan slowly looked toward Owen, then toward Mara. Neither of them had ever seen the photograph before, and neither of them realized that Daniel Bennett's final story had not yet been told. The last secret 3 days passed. Nathan couldn't stop thinking about the photograph. It wasn't the image itself that bothered him. It was Daniel's handwriting on the back. Find him when ready. Daniel never wasted words. If he had written that sentence, it meant someone had intentionally waited years before revealing it. The photograph lay on Mara's desk. Both of them had studied it dozens of times. Daniel looked no older than 30. Beside him stood a boy of about 6 years old. The child smiled brightly while holding a tiny wooden sailboat. Behind them, Blackwater Point Lighthouse. Nathan traced the faded edges. I've searched every public record. No missing family. No adoption files. No school records. It's like this boy never existed. Mara remained unusually calm. Maybe we've been asking the wrong question again. Nathan smiled. Just like Lucas said. She nodded. We're assuming Daniel wanted us to find the boy. She turned the photograph over. What if he wanted the boy to find himself? That afternoon, Owen quietly entered the workshop. He noticed the photograph lying on the table. Without hesitation, he froze. His breathing slowed. Nathan immediately noticed. You've seen this before. Owen looked away. I don't know. His fingers trembled. I just feel like I do. Mara gently slid the picture toward him. Take your time. Owen stared at the child's face. Then, almost unconsciously, he reached into his backpack. From a hidden pocket, he removed a small wooden sailboat, old, hand-carved. One tiny corner had been repaired with blue paint. Nathan's eyes widened. The sailboat in Owen's hand was identical to the one in the photograph. Silence filled the room. Owen looked confused. I've had this since I was little. My grandfather said. Someone gave it to me before he passed away. Mara carefully took the toy. Turning it over, she discovered something carved underneath. Tiny letters, almost invisible. Keep building. Her voice barely escaped. Dad. Nathan immediately called Marcus. Within an hour, Marcus arrived carrying an old metal storage box. I thought you might ask for this someday. He opened it. Inside were dozens of notebooks, maintenance records, boat logs, Supply receipts. One yellowed envelope. Addressed to Marcus. He unfolded the brittle paper. Daniel's handwriting filled the page. Marcus, if this letter is ever opened, it means Owen has finally found his own path. Please don't tell him who he is before then. Children deserve the freedom to discover themselves before they inherit someone else's expectations. Nathan looked up. Who is Owen? Marcus smiled sadly. Not Daniel's son. Mara quietly exhaled. I never believed he was. Marcus continued. Years ago, a fishing boat capsized during a winter storm. Daniel helped rescue everyone aboard. Everyone, except one young engineer. The room fell silent. He didn't survive, but his little boy did. Marcus looked toward Owen. That little boy, and was you. Owen stared at him. I don't remember. Marcus nodded. You were only 3. Your father had been one of Daniel's brightest students. He believed engineering should protect ordinary families. Nathan slowly understood. So Daniel. Marcus smiled. Visited Owen every birthday. He never tried to replace his father. He simply made sure. The boy never stopped believing in tomorrow. Mara wiped away a quiet tear. He was protecting another dream. Nathan opened the final notebook. Inside, there were no inventions. Only names. Hundreds of names. Former students. Young volunteers, teachers. Mechanics, nurses, builders. Beside every name, Daniel had written a single sentence describing their greatest strength. Not their intelligence. Not their achievements. Their character. Listens before speaking. Shares credit. Never leaves anyone behind. Learns from failure. Nathan slowly closed the notebook. This was his masterpiece. Mara smiled. He wasn't building machines anymore. He was building people. That evening, Owen climbed alone to Blackwater Point Lighthouse. The sea was calm. The sunset painted the water in shades of gold. He held the tiny wooden sailboat in one hand, Daniel's fountain pen in the other. He looked toward the endless horizon. I wish I'd met you. The wind answered softly. Not with words, but with the slow, familiar sweep of the lighthouse beam. For a moment, he almost felt someone standing beside him. Not as a ghost, not as a memory, but as every lesson quietly passed from one generation to the next. Then, he noticed something tucked beneath the lighthouse bench. A small brass plaque. Years of salt air had nearly erased its inscription. He brushed away the dust. It read, "A lighthouse does not tell ships where to go. It simply helps them see." Daniel Bennett. Owen smiled. For the first time, he understood. Daniel had never been searching for the perfect invention. He had spent his life becoming a lighthouse. A light that never goes out 10 years after Daniel Bennett's final blueprint. Harbor City awoke beneath a sky painted with gold. The morning air carried the sound of bicycles instead of traffic. Children crossed bridges that no longer flooded. Neighborhood gardens covered land that had once been abandoned. The city had not become perfect. Arguments still happened. Mistakes were still made. Dreams still failed. But people no longer waited for someone else to fix everything. They had learned. The future belonged to those willing to build it together. Inside the Daniel Bennett Community Lab, the workshop buzzed with quiet energy. Young inventors filled every table. Some soldered circuit boards. Others carved wooden prototypes. Several debated ideas around a whiteboard covered in sketches. No one noticed the framed photograph hanging near the entrance. Daniel, Samuel, Victor, Helen, Marcus, Nathan, Mara, and one empty chair. Visitors often asked why it had never been filled. Mara always gave the same answer. Because the next person hasn't arrived yet. Nathan quietly walked through the workshop. His hair was almost completely gray now. He no longer carried a briefcase. Only a notebook. Students greeted him warmly. Not because he had once led Archer Industries. Because he remembered every student's name. He stopped beside a young girl struggling with a broken motor. She sighed. "It doesn't work." Nathan smiled. "Good." She looked confused. "I've been working on it for 3 weeks. Even better." She laughed. "That's exactly what Miss Mara says." Nathan winked. She learned from someone stubborn. Across the room, Mara watched Owen teach a class. He stood exactly where she once had. Not giving answers. Asking questions. A nervous student raised his hand. "What if my invention isn't important?" Owen looked around the room. Then picked up the old wooden sailboat. He still carried it every day. He placed it gently on the table. This little boat never crossed an ocean. It never rescued anyone. It never changed history. The students listened closely. It only reminded one frightened little boy to keep building. He smiled. "Sometimes, hope is the greatest invention you'll ever create." Mara quietly wiped away a tear. Daniel's words lived on. Not because anyone memorized them. Because they had become part of how people lived. That evening, the entire city gathered at Blackwater Point Lighthouse. Not for a ceremony. Not for a celebration. Just a tradition. Every year, on the anniversary of the day Harbor City chose compassion over control, people climbed the hill together, families, teachers, engineers, artists, children. No speeches echoed through the crowd. Only conversations, laughter, music, life. Helen sat on a wooden bench overlooking the sea. Marcus handed her a warm cup of coffee. "I think Daniel would have hated this." Helen laughed. "Oh, he never liked attention." She smiled toward the lighthouse. "Exactly. Which is why he'd secretly love seeing everyone here. For each other." As the sun disappeared beyond the horizon, the lighthouse beam slowly came to life. Its warm light swept across the water. The crowd instinctively fell silent. Not because anyone asked them to. Because everyone remembered. Nathan stepped beside Mara. "We finally finished his story." She gently shook her head. "No. We only finished our chapter." Nathan smiled. "There's a difference." She nodded. "A very important one." Owen climbed the narrow staircase to the lantern room. He carried nothing. No speech, no notes. Only Daniel's fountain pen in his pocket. He opened the small maintenance journal that had rested there for decades. The final page was still blank. He uncapped the pen, thought for a moment, then wrote a single sentence. "Leave the light on for someone you've never met." He closed the journal, placed the pen beside it, and quietly walked away. He never signed his name. He didn't need to. Far below, a little girl visiting the lighthouse for the first time looked up at her father. "Why does the light keep turning?" He smiled. "So people won't lose their way." She thought for a moment, then asked, "What if nobody is lost?" The father looked toward the endless sea. The light stays on anyway. Because someday, someone will be. High above the cliffs, the lighthouse completed another slow rotation. Its beam stretched across the dark ocean, farther than anyone could see, farther than anyone could measure. Like every act of kindness, its true destination remained unknown. And perhaps that was exactly the point, because the brightest lights were never built to be admired. They were built so someone else could find the courage to keep going.